I find Candace Owens darkly fascinating, partly because every one of her segments seems to be such an exercise in projection that I'm almost shocked. I'm not shocked given, who she is, but I'm almost shocked that she doesn't have any amount of self-awareness to realize that. She just went on this bizarre rant against therapy and how people don't need it and how you shouldn't need it. And I'm just going to let her take the lead here.
Do not consider yourselves wrong for going to therapy. I once went to therapy. I had to try it out because my parents were getting divorced and I was dragged into it. I hated it. It wasn't for me, but it is for some people. And I do suppose that some people are coming out and being better people. But on the whole, as we move toward this society that believes that feelings trump facts, the facts don't matter, that the feelings are so important that we have to ignore the facts, we have to assume that the majority of the therapy sessions that are happening are reflecting that, right? That you have people sitting in a chair telling people that their feelings are all that matter, that no matter what they do in this world, it's perfectly okay because of some tragedy or upset that they suffer when they were 5 years old. And what has it produced? Well, it's produced a society of men like Prince Harry and women like Adele who overshare, who tell us way too much. And it's not a society that I want to live in. I want to live in a society like the one that my grandfather lived in. And I tell people this all the time. I never saw my grandfather cry a day in his life, even when I knew he was positively destroyed and heartbroken when we lost my grandmother, surprisingly, right? A woman that he was married to from the time that he was 17. The woman that he dedicated his entire life to and built his entire life around. My grandfather did not cry at her funeral. He was one of those men that believed that no matter what you were going through, you let it burn in your chest. Right? And a lot of men don't like that.
It's not good for you, man.
Wait, okay, just pause it.
Jesus.
We're idealizing the fact that her grandfather was not in touch with his emotions enough that he wasn't able to. And maybe he cried in private, but she's like, it would have made me uncomfortable to see him cry. So I'm so thrilled that he did not.
And like she sees it as a positive that he didn't visibly show emotion, that his longtime wife is dead. She is longing for a society filled with like sociopathy, but also truly repression. I mean, that is what she's longing for. I mean, that's what they advocate for with trans and gay people. I mean, you can be who you are, but I don't want to hear about it. They want trans kids to either kill themselves, basically, or go back in the closet so we don't have to hear about it. And that's the ideal that she's advocating for there. But damn, I mean, if this isn't a cry for help and therapy for her, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a critique of therapy generally that like decades and decades of professionalized therapy hasn't led to people being generally happier in a sense. And I think the underlying problem is actually like capitalism and things like that that need to be addressed. But I would also say, like, in a country that doesn't even offer people the chance to see if therapy might be good for them because of price discrimination, like this is basically just serving that status quo of like, you know what, like because I like, despite me saying that thing up front about like the decades long where we have therapy, like, I still think there is probably something useful to having somebody you can go and work through things with people, and we just don't offer that to people. Instead, we have people like Candace saying, actually, you're better off without it anyway.
Choke down your feelings and do not question the system, which means don't question capitalism, as you say. Yeah.
The most interesting part about that to me, and I'm sorry for cackling when she said that her grandfather didn't cry at his wife's funeral, but it's just, you know, I love how especially her and Ben Shapiro start off a lot of these segments talking about like the liberal tendency to position facts over or feelings over facts, and then like really just go into like a entirely personalized feelings-based opinion about the way people should behave. And it seems like her main reason for not wanting other people to share their emotions is because it makes her uncomfortable, which is not like a fact-based.
Her grandfather, right? You know, why is she longing for the fact that he wouldn't cry? It's because seeing an authority figure in her life crying would have made her uncomfortable, which is the thinking of a 10-year-old.
And it's about, something she's taken with her into her whole life and has, just positioned as an inherent quality of masculinity. But, you hate to say it, but if she were comfortable in her own feelings and comfortable in her own self, it shouldn't matter if the person is crying over there. It shouldn't matter if someone is telling you their feelings. It seems as though, Republicans and people like Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro understand that what they're doing is positioning their feelings as facts. And they don't want to get into a back and forth with you about your feelings. They just want to, focus on their own as an objective, fact, as in feelings that are objective. It's right to feel this way in this moment. That makes it a fact versus not crying at your funeral, or rather crying at your wife's funeral, which is just feeling.
Exactly.
They just think that a certain type of feeling.
It is literally a self-created safe space in which her feelings she can identify them as fact, which gives them more validity, as opposed to other people who might be questioning their own feelings with other fact sets, which is a challenging thing to do, but that is kind of the purpose of therapy. She could unpack that in therapy very easily, and she has the financial ability to do so. I'm hard pressed to think of another public figure that I think could benefit more from it. But
also, there are different types of therapy too. She seems like her understanding of therapy is entirely based on popular culture, and that seems to be the dominant strain of therapy people talk about on Twitter, which is the upper middle class white woman going into the therapist to tell her how hard her life is, and then get a prescription for Xanax and sort of zone out. But that's not what all therapy is. Even, some of it is cognitive behavioral therapy. Some of it is psychoanalysis. Some of it is just drug therapy. This is just a cartoonish, vulgar opinion about therapy because she doesn't want to see men cry. She doesn't want to see a man cry because it would make her, it would make her sexuality and sexual identity feel different. That's just which is entirely feelings based.
100%. And I really do feel at least in therapy for me, when I'm talking about my own feelings, there's a lot of times my feelings are literally challenged by fact sets, so I don't catastrophize or make things into stuff that's bigger than they are. But that regardless, let's just fit.
The more I hear about Candace Owens' teenage years, the more I feel she maybe should just try to find a therapist that works for her, as opposed to say oh, this isn't for me, because it seems like she has some stuff to work through.
Yeah,
really glosses over the whole "my parents got divorced." It was really upsetting. She was stupid.
Yeah.
Thrust into it, dumb. Keep going.
Also, I was a victim of a racist attack by a politically connected kid.
Right.
What do you want her to cry about it?
Yeah. That would be feelings. You're going.
My grandmother, surprisingly, right? A woman that he was married to from the time that he was 17. The woman that he dedicated his entire life to and built his entire life around. My grandfather did not cry at her funeral. He was one of those men that believed that no matter what you were going through, you let it burn in your chest, right? And a lot of men don't like that now. Men don't know. Men need to be vulnerable. You actually don't need to be vulnerable in public. You don't need to be vulnerable in public. We need to see examples of strength everywhere. Strong women and strong men. And of course, we all assume that you have moments of vulnerability. We all do. All I'm saying is that we don't want to hear about it. Stop. Button it up. Let it burn in your chest. And that's all I have to say about that.
Let your pain burn in your chest.
Who is expressing their feelings to Candace Owens? I cannot imagine trying to get sympathy.
Certainly not her husband, because that would be weakness. Or her grandfather, yeah. She's also
the only time I ever saw my husband cry is when Kanye West canceled that multi-million-dollar Parler deal.
Parler merger.
And listen, he was allowed to do that, okay?
Yeah, I just...
Do you think she's speaking to Kanye with this?
She's speaking to herself. She's also she's conflating repression with masculinity and strength, and also just frankly, when conservatives repress their feelings, they are much more willing to accept simple answers to things as opposed to more complex questions, and that I think benefits her and her Daily Wire colleagues.
Yeah. Rather than also processing it healthily, let it get your blood pressure up for decades.
And then you can see outside forces, right? Maybe they're brown or from a different country, or they have a different gender ideology. They're the threats. There's nothing you need to look at internally for. It's all outside shadowy figures.
Or even, if it isn't outside, it's the obverse of that, which is that if you're having a problem, if you're feeling bad, that's just your own weakness. And so like, obviously a lot of therapy nowadays, insofar as people can afford it, is probably talking about like structural issues, people feeling anxious about the climate, people feeling anxious about, inflation, I guess, or like just being generally unable to afford things, people feeling anxious because of LGBTQ issues and the various forms of hate crimes we have in our society. Yeah. And she just wants you to bury that all in. Don't express it out loud, because whether it's a feeling or not, like expressing that you feel anxiety about hate crimes in our society might lead to change in those fields. Like the right-wing goal has been, as long as I've been online, to frame anything that is expressed with any sort of emotion as though it's somehow invalid. Yeah. And then when they find out that the rest of the world that they navigate doesn't really treat it that way, they just like come online and whine about how like no one respects how they feel about feelings.
Yeah, this is like Andrew Tate, like sort of mindlessness.
Yes.
Like actually, like it's your fault for not being tough enough. I mean, just ridiculous.
And if you make it about if you make it about your own, personal failings, people are not going to be less predisposed to think about the world more critically, and that their feelings are actually connected to larger society. It's just it's a way to atomize people.
Yeah.
Also, her longing.
Hey, you know
for
what?
the
I have
days-
an idea. The next time Candace Owens sees somebody that transitions their gender, maybe let that burn in her chest instead of getting onto some platform and bitching about it.
Yeah, we don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Stop.
Right.
Facts.
I gotta say, her longing for the days of when her grandpa was told that men should be men. I mean, I'm looking up a little bit of history, what I could find on him, and he did give a interview to the Daily Mail a couple of years ago when he was upset that his granddaughter laughed at the New Zealand mass shooting in Christchurch, and in it
the one she inspired.
Yes, the one she inspired. And he says in this, I'm from the South and I was born and mostly raised in North Carolina. And I know how it was. My father was attacked by the Ku Klux Klan back in the day. And he put me under the bed because of all the bullets that were coming into the house. I mean, I'm going to assume that has something to do with the guy's emotional state later in life.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So maybe him not crying at his wife's funeral is not something to hold up on a pedestal, but actually something to feel really bad about, honestly.
And
just interesting what you emphasize.
And maybe he wouldn't, as she claims, long for those days, right? Yeah. Speaking for him.
And also, some people just process emotions differently. It's like not all grief. She assumes that he, cried in public. Cried in private, maybe was vulnerable in private. Some people don't cry when they're sad. Some people just throw up. Some people get like so sad or so anxious that they just they just expel things from their gastrointestinal tract. It's just like she wants everyone's emotions to conform to a very rigid standards that either index masculinity or strength or femininity. And people are just complex. That's why they go to therapy.
Mm-hmm. Rob from Dedham, don't forget Candace Owens was a liberal when she started her career. She represses everything, including her politics, for money. Yeah. Abu Mancho says, I am a bit older than Candace, and my grandfather may have been a bit older than hers, and from an even earlier time. I remember as a child seeing him cry at my aunt's funeral, and it remains one of the most moving memories I have.
I could think of at least one of my grandpas crying. I mean, and I didn't be like, oh, that's the soy grandpa.
Yeah.
Hey, stop.
Candace Owens is only 33. That seems impossible.
I know.
That seems like I just I remember her being on television since I was in like college. How is that possible?
Yeah,
No, I don't think she was. She started like in 2015. She was still like red pill black on the sort of alt-right YouTube sphere.
It feels like she's been with us for much longer.
Like she's been here forever.
Yeah, Bingo Dango says, holy shit, Candace is definitely in the top 5 most evil right-wing commentators.
I mean, that origin story is wild.
Of the mainstream ones, her and Tucker Carlson, I would put definitely towards the top.
Mm-hmm.